There we go. Hey guys, Slackard here. So Michael gifted me Pro Wrestling X for Christmas, and pro wrestling games are hard. That's my thesis. There's not an entertainment property that I actively follow, despite having completely lost me as a consumer or as a viewer, than the WWE. Like, I still casually keep tabs on larger storylines, roster movements, the palace intrigue, but otherwise I haven't watched a weekly episode in damn near over 15 years. And even then, by 2008 or 2009, it was largely out of habit than something that I actually enjoyed. My favorite comparison to watching the WWE, being a fan of it, is to be a fan of a mid-market sports team. But specifically, I'm thinking about my hometown team, the Washington Commanders. Or, as you would know them, the Washington Football Team, a name I believe they should have kept. See, you had your moments, and that's why people keep coming back, those times when you were great. But it's one thing to be horrible in a major media market, it's another thing to be prolongedly mediocre, if not garbage, and have the feeling that no one outside the area cares at all. Ripe for mockery, stuck in persistent year-over-year atrophy, and alike in both of these examples, an ownership group that treats a national or global property as their own personal fiefdom. Rot in hell, Dan! Or United Kingdom. You make the joke. Where I grew up, wrestling was never cool, and WWE was, and is, oftentimes embarrassing. You have great moments or great periods that seemingly make it all worth it. Matches or storylines that surpass the banalities of suspending your disbelief. This is real emotion, this is real stakes, and it's real violence. And then you have moments that make you question whether or not it's this week or this year that you're going to quit watching entirely. In general, it's kind of rear looking, like the best moments are in the past and they'll never be topped by anything that happens now. So like the new or like the next generation of WWE fans is kind of a paradox. Wrestling in the States has never been more popular, and most would probably say better, than in the Attitude Era of the late 90s, and it's been a steady decline since then. So new fans pretty much just means new markets. Mexico, Europe, India, Saudi. The erosion doesn't get addressed, only minimized. But of course there's more than just the WWE in the US. There have been more promotions and more game companies that have tried their hand at this whole pro wrestling thing, and it's been a mixed bag, meaning mostly it's not been very good. As far as pro wrestling games are concerned, there's quite a lot that making such a game demands just by its concept. You need strikes, you need grapples, you need Irish whips, you need mechanics in place to make the Irish whip make sense. Rear grapples, ground strikes, ground grapples, usually a submission hold, running moves, aerial moves, reversals, blocks, other counters, finishing moves, a damage system, pins, and of course a roster of wrestlers that are differentiated from one another, not just in terms of size and form, but also in character and gimmick. Oh, you should also maybe experiment with a face-heel dynamic, bleeding, weapons, cheating. Just in that, there's already so much animation work, collisions, physics, and logic that needs to be in place to get something close to what you'd see on television. And from what I described, something that you'd see on TV like 40 years ago. I think there's like a basic level of wrestling game fans seeking an alternative. Nowadays, WWE is married to 2K as its developer, which is just fucking fantastic. In 2019, they coughed up a stinker in WWE 2K20. A title so universally loathed it actually caused development to take a year off in order to regroup and hopefully get back some sense of public goodwill. I still think of that release as a notable point because now it was the turn of WWE Games fans to feel like just a wallet and not a player. Like, you're going to buy the current release with premium currency and DLC and all of that, and you're going to like it because where else are you going to go? I remember that's when enthusiasm peaked around AEW's game, Fight Forever, which got delayed and then released to, I believe, middling reviews, and the Wrestling Code, which is nowadays in a more ambiguous state of development. Now, this ain't new by any means. 2K has stewarded this franchise since 2K12, and there are great, well-received entries in the series, as there always are, left in the wake of an incessant yearly release schedule and dead servers. Now, the point of this was that kind of searching is very familiar to me. Like, let me take you back to the early 2000s, back when I was in fucking middle school. I was T13 to 17 demoed all the way the fuck out. Like, my favorite games were probably Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series and WWE's output on the PS2. I have a note here around what kind of music I was downloading on LimeWire, but I don't want to. And I was on pro wrestling forums looking for specifically games to play on my PC, which I guarantee you was one of those Dells that you bought at Best Buy that like totally shit out on you in 2 years. Now we're probably around 2004, 2005, which means we're not far away from the releases of Smackdown Shut Your Mouth, Smackdown Here Comes the Pain, and even the first Smackdown vs. Raw games. These games were developed by Ukes, who shepherded the franchise since the WWF games landed on the PlayStation, and they're all great. You know how I said that pro wrestling is rear-facing? Here Comes the Pain is still ranked as one of the best wrestling games ever made over 20 years after its release. Sidebar, I've got to say it. I've got to nominate Shut Your Mouth as the PS2 GOAT. NWO theme. Christian at Last theme. The best Chris Jericho, the best Booker T, the best Rob Van Dam, my Durango Edge, long hair Billy Kidman is in this bitch in tights. Like, put on the wife beater and jorts, dude. I still would pick an open-ended season mode like Shut Your Mouth over entries where you just build to winning the Royal Rumble and challenging the heavyweight champion at WrestleMania, no matter what else happens in between. It also has, in my opinion, the best move bank in the PS2 games before some of these pro or shoot fighting moves were taken out because WWE doesn't do that. Each one of those games could be played for tens, if not hundreds of hours. Now, I did mention that it's like part of being a wrestling game fan that feels like, you know, wanting more, but I also remember which makes everything make sense. Around that time, your options on PC were WWF Raw, which was bad and not even worth buying. Cult Classic Booking Simulator, Extreme Warfare Revenge, but keep in mind, I'm in middle school and just look at this fucking game. And the output of Matt Dickey, aka M. Dickey, he of Wrestling Empire, one-time entrant in the small name, big ego section of TV tropes under real-life examples. Now, I respect M. Dickey immensely, but the criticism of his games, especially around that time, were pretty fair. That criticism being that his games sucked. So, not fair at all. I remember a post on the forum that basically said that verbatim. M. Dickey games suck. You should check out this game in development called Pro Wrestling X. I checked out the website and it looked interesting. There was 3D models of wrestlers doing moves. And, you know, it was just another wrestling game in development, so I signed up for their newsletter. Now, these newsletters, which were development updates, were sent with some regularity, and I'm certain that I was interested to some capacity. But, at that time, if you told me that a game was in development, I would assume that it would come out in, the next year or two. So I probably waited, but then that time came and passed, and then I lost interest. And then life happened, by which I mean over 20 years of my life. I graduated high school, I moved to Philadelphia for college, I graduated college, I moved to New York, I got a job, and all the while these newsletters were probably still being sent to my childhood email address, which I've long lost access to. August 3rd, 2017. New Legacy Inc., a favorite of mine, posts the video, Pro Wrestling X is certainly a wrestling game, watched by myself probably during the pandemic. And wait, you mean that Pro Wrestling X? The one I heard about as a teenager?
Take your goddamn time. What? Bitch. Oh, fuck!
That's not what I thought was going to happen.
No, me neither. What the fuck?
On the wrong ropes.
Not me! Oh! Jesus! Come how?
2 count.
What the fuck?
Big slam!
That's what I'm talking about.
Grapple, go
Later,
behind.
Beauty.
Okay.
Oh,
Jesus.
What?
can you do it again?
Fuck yeah.
Wow, it looks. Dwarf Fortress of Project Zomboid, a small development team, aka a couple of dudes, taking their time on the beloved indie project. This ain't that, and I'll tell you a little bit why, but we gotta wind it back. The story of Pro Wrestling X actually begins a bit earlier than when I discovered it. According to their website, in 2002, Dave Wisnowski, the protagonist of this tale, started a website called Wrestling Gamers United. Quote, Spring 2002 wasn't the greatest for fans of professional wrestling video games. Hungry for the next WWF No Mercy, a segment of the genre's most devoted fans were disillusioned with subpar releases such as WCW Backstage Assault. Disgruntled fans found an outlet on message boards around the world. Complaints, frustrations, wish lists for the perfect wrestling game, all chronicled for the world to see. Wrestling game producers, however, dismissed these messages as a vocal minority, a small niche that didn't have the economic clout to be taken seriously. Let's take a second to catch you all up. WWF No Mercy was released in 2000 by the OG THQ for the Nintendo 64 and developed by the Aki Corporation. No Mercy is regarded as one of, if not the best wrestling video games ever released. And I know I said the exact same thing about Here Comes the Pain, because that's been a debate for years. Which one is the better title, No Mercy or Here Comes the Pain? No Mercy is still getting modded to this day with contemporaneous rosters, arenas, even moves. Or like Ultimate Editions that combine the best of all eras. AEW star and executive Kenny Omega even tweeted out that the inspiration for their game was going to be trying to recapture the feeling of Aki's gameplay. On the other side of the spectrum is WCW Backstage Assault, also released in 2000, developed by Kodiak Interactive and published by Electronic Arts. Backstage Assault is regarded as one of the worst pro wrestling games ever made, but even that is kind of putting it lightly. Its reputation is tantamount to a fucking blight. When Dave says subpar releases such as WCW Backstage Assault, he might as well just mean WCW Backstage Assault. I personally don't really get it. It may be bad, but it's not perniciously bad. It may not even be that bad. I'm still amused by the whole gimmick of the game, which is wrestling with no ring. But I will concede that it is a bummer last note, and honestly pretty good summation of the dire last years of World Championship Wrestling before being sold by Time Warner to our friends at Titan Sports in 2001. But even then, if you're looking for the next No Mercy, you might get it with Shut Your Mouth in the next year if you're just talking about a good wrestling game. But, shortly after THQ jumped from WCW, where Aki had been making great titles like WCW vs. NWO Revenge, to the WWF, where they made WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy, Aki was soon dropped. They, WWF, THQ, maybe both of them, decided to pivot to PlayStation titles, and so Yuke's was brought on as the developer. So you literally can't get the same game from a different developer. But I'm not thinking that that's what Dave is talking about. Let's continue. The birth of Wrestling Gamers United. On April 3rd, 2002, Dave Wisnowski set out to change that impression. He created a website called Wrestling Gamers United, hoping to combine the scattered shouts into a common voice, one that game producers took seriously. Wow, since the launch of the WGU website less than a week ago, response has been out of this world. My email inbox has been flooded with over 5,000 emails and survey responses so far. It shows me and the game developers just how hungry we are for a better wrestling game. It also shows them that we aren't a fringe minority. There are thousands of us. Wrestling Gamers United Newsletter number 3, April 12, 2002. Lighting the fuse. In May of that year, gamers' hopes were raised with the announcement of WrestleMania X8 18 for the GameCube. THQ, the game's producer, promised a worthy sequel to No Mercy, making very deliberate claims its development, telling wrestling gamers exactly what they wanted to hear. However, when WrestleMania 18 was previewed at E3, something became obvious. THQ lied. Flat out, shamelessly, arrogantly lied. Oh, so he literally just wants another No Mercy. Never mind. All reports from E3 contain the same basic opinions of the game. It's a beefed up Smackdown with a few extra additions. So WrestleMania 18's mouthpiece, Sanders Keel, wanted us to go pre-order the game because it was going to be such a great and fantastic wrestling simulation. A simulation that actually removed the targeted body part damage from the game engine. A simulation that one gamer reported let Kevin Nash climb the turnbuckle and fly halfway across the ring. A simulation that another gamer reported had him lose a match to a sleeper hold, put on him by a badly beaten down opponent. A simulation that apparently let Scott Hall take repeated last rides from The Undertaker and still get up and fight like a fresh opponent. Does this sound like the game THQ promised us? Hell no. So essentially, the wrestling simulation wasn't a wrestling simulation because it let 7-foot-tall Kevin Nash, who I believe was on a quarter of a quad at that time, like total, he shouldn't be able to dive across the ring with such grace. And that wrestlers didn't fatigue or injure in the way that you might expect. And that they took the words of a representative of a publisher at face value at E3. Because, why would they lie to us? Why would our parents lie to us? You telling me that they snuck in my room and replaced my baby teeth with money? That's fucking stupid. What would they do with my baby teeth? So what can we do about it? I'll tell you what I and at least 42 other people told me they did. We canceled our pre-orders of WrestleMania 18. Add it all up and it comes to $2,099.58 of our money that THQ won't be getting. And that's a promise that won't be broken. I don't know about the rest of you, but the days of blind devotion to any one game developer are over. I'll never pre-order another game again, and I have 3 good reasons. SBJBI, which is Smackdown Just Bring It, Raw, WWF Raw on Xbox, and most heartbreaking of all, WrestleMania 18. THQ has blatantly and deliberately abused our trust and used our love of wrestling games against us to fill their greasy wallets. Wrestling Gamers United newsletter number 10, May 31st, 2002. What's funny is that canceling his pre-order for WrestleMania 18 on GameCube was actually a prescient bet because that game wasn't very good. But all those titles mentioned were the first entries by that publisher for that genre on new hardware. And I think it's emblematic of the pro wrestling genre that you need to iterate to get somewhere good. Now, however, for the Extreme Championship Wrestling games or any WCW game on PlayStation, that good never came. But I doubt that you'll find a wrestling game that scores a run at its first at-bat on new hardware. Why don't you make your own game? It's often said that arguing on the internet is a pointless endeavor. In a WrestleMania 18 GameFAQ message board, however, history changed forever with a simple off-the-cuff comment. Dave, under the moniker Wishbone X, posted a rant about the state of wrestling games. A follow-up response came. If you think you can do better, why don't you make your own game? WGU's mission transformed overnight. Instead of becoming a voice for the market, Dave made it a personal mission to build his own wrestling game, making it official. The fuse was lit on a message board, and the powder keg exploded with the release of WrestleMania 18. For the next year, Dave researched the market, gathered a team of supporters around the globe, and began to brainstorm. The project was dubbed Pro Wrestling X, and in March of 2003, it was made official. It is with complete and utter joy that I announce to you this week a major new milestone in the story of Wrestler Gamers United in the Pro Wrestling X project. Last week, all legal documents were finalized with the provincial government and a new corporate entity was officially created to oversee the development of Pro Wrestling X. As a result, I am proud to announce the creation of Wishbone X Creations Limited. Wrestling Gamers United newsletter number 54, March 21st, 2003. To recap, PWX was born from Dave's dissatisfaction from the first releases of THQ's wrestling products on new hardware, and pretty pedantic critiques that seemingly only served to debase a game for not being like its predecessor that refined its output across 6 games or so. His enthusiasm was bolstered by a random comment on a GamesFAQs message board, and like maybe a couple thousand subscribers to his newsletter that convinced him that he had a market. I'm certain that I've heard of worse premises for starting a game or even a whole company, but I'm having difficulty thinking of them. I'm certain that even I was bored would be a more auspicious start than the reasons that Dave has listed. This short history wraps up with an incredible understatement likely added later. If Dave only knew what he was getting himself into. And ain't that the fucking truth. So Dave Wisnowski quits his job with the support of his wife and starts a company called Wishbone X, setting about the modest goal of creating the best wrestling game ever. In 2005, Dave gave an interview with GameSpot.com. The author, Alex Navarro, takes some time to set forth that gamers like Dave were feeling discontented with the current state of wrestling games, especially with WWE monopolizing licenses and their contract being with THQ. Sure, there was NWA TNA, but they were just now getting on a major cable network, Spike TV, and a video game wouldn't be in the cards for a couple of years. Something that makes me chuckle is the author writing that wrestling video games sales remain strong, in contrast to WWE's television ratings not hitting the highs they once did. And oh my god, we're not even close to how far the ratings are going to fall. Navarro writes, it's not often that you hear about someone with no previous experience in the game industry just up and putting together his own project, but that's just what Wisnowski did. Now, in 2005, it may not have been so common to run into the archetypal Bubba with no experience endeavoring to make the first, only, and final game of his dreams. But of course, in the years following, it would become way more common. So yeah, Dave had no hard skills to start this project without any help, and would be kind of more in an executive producer role on smaller projects. He would be setting a defined vision and direction for the game, he would be hiring and organizing talent, and bankrolling the whole company. And of course, you know what one runs into when they take this approach. If there's no money, absolutely no progress will be made. You don't have the ability to whack away at C# or Blender on your downtime during dry spells. Even if there's no shot that you'd get very far at all, you ought to be independently wealthy, a great salesman, or a great manager. Maybe a combination of those three, possibly all of them. While Dave did get people excited for the project, his capacity in those other two facets were questionable. And Dave recognized this. He says, I decided to see what it would take to produce a really good wrestling game and have the fans help out. I didn't want to just make an indie hobby game. I wanted to take a shot at developing a truly outstanding title on par with the best games out there. I learned it would take two things, a great crew and money to hire them full time. That's exactly what I set out to obtain, and as of today we have succeeded. We've raised first round financing from the private sector and through Telefilm Canada. We've got a talented and experienced crew consisting of both eager young artists and experienced game professionals with experience at companies like EA and THQ. Sure, that's a little something, realizing what you can and cannot do, and hiring a team that will help your project succeed, as in making the entirety of your project. But what's this about financing? Later on, Dave elaborates. Sweat equity alone for the first few years was easily over $80,000, even at minimum wage. Plus, I paid all of the legal and operating expenses out of my own pocket. Even after we received funding to pay the crew, I didn't take my full producer fee, nor did I accept payment for all the other administration work. My goal is to get Pro Wrestling X to market, not become rich in the process. Besides, every dollar I spend is like $2 I'll have to pay back. Any financial reward I get will come from a successful game, and hopefully the chance to continue the franchise. To do proper market research and build a playable prototype of the game engine, as well as the Create a Wrestler feature, we spent well over $100,000, which is pretty standard. To actually develop the commercial version of the game will obviously be substantially more, into the millions. We've been fortunate to receive generous investment from private investors as well as Telefilm Canada, which is a company in Canada that supports the creation of primarily film-based projects, to get us this far. Everyone is happy with the market research results and the prototype, so if it all goes well in the next few weeks, we will be funded again to complete the project. Okay, so as an aside, Dave and Wishbone X/WGU, they're based out of Canada. So the assumption for this is Canadian dollars. I don't know if anyone's going to be a stickler about this. I just wanted to CYA. It's not like that big of a... Oh, edit this out. I didn't realize that the initial plan was heading in this direction. Like, reading what he has to say, it seemed as though Pro Wrestling X was actually kind of starting off on the right foot. Granted, this is at a time where mass independent distribution through a platform like Steam wasn't necessarily an option. So for Dave, the way to actually get your game onto store shelves would be through a publisher. So you spend money to have something to show, and you have data through your market research. And to a certain extent, you've galvanized public support around your project. So it doesn't really seem that unheard of that an investor or a publisher would bite on this game. And who knows, maybe this will evolve into a more established and sustainable partnership in the future. Dave already mentioned a franchise. Responding to a question about how an indie developer would meet publishers, Dave responds, "We don't try to entice publishers with our long track record of previously published games or valuable brand name license because we have none of that. They did it through fan enthusiasm. We created a buzz in our own way, and publishers recognize that we have our finger on the pulse of something potentially very successful. The only thing about this is what happens if publishers don't take you up on your offer. What happens if that money from Telefilm is the only investment that you receive? Where we stand in the present, it's all still a pretty big gamble. One would say it's probably pretty reasonable to spend any penny set aside on just getting something that does most of what you want and letting the game serve as its own PR. Your big break, if it ever comes, probably won't come from a publishing deal. The other fascinating thing about this interview to me is how much Dave's tone contrasts with the manifesto on ProWrestlingX.com. Of course, you wouldn't expect it to be carried through, but you have the curmudgeon-y nerd rage of that screed against a much more nuanced sophistication of the challenges and opportunities of this game. Like where it possibly could stand in the market and what the market would demand from a title like this. Taking it all together, it really doesn't seem like PWX was a pipe dream from the start, a complete non-starter. It's a game with risks and challenges beyond the normal risks and challenges of developing a game, sure, but this wasn't like a disaster that you might see on Kickstarter or something like that. Now, let's turn to a post by an anonymous programmer for Pro Wrestling X, described as a post-mortem, a bit of a call-out in itself. And by the way, thank God for the Wayback Machine. If I couldn't find this, I don't think I would make this video at all. Now, the programmer starts with his credits, which seem noteworthy. Has released games, has authored books, has made software, has even released an engine. I'll be referring to the author of this post as the programmer from this point forward, and just for clarification purposes, the part of this first section takes place before that GameSpot interview. The programmer states that Dave Wisnowski contacted him after he released a hand-to-hand fighting game demo. I was introduced to Pro Wrestling X and was excited to be a part of it. So, for a nominal fee, I agreed to create a demo using Reality Factory and outline the code and technical requirements to create a wrestling game. Of course, what he was entering into was a small team, Dave and some artists. They may have had a bunch of graphical assets, but maybe less of an idea of how to turn that into something playable. Anyway, the programmer details how he got started. The first step entailed Dave sending me a Nintendo 64 console and the game No Mercy. Oh my fucking god. Okay, I was instructed to make a game using this type of camera and this type of N64 control scheme. I began to play and study No Mercy, a great game, and when I felt I could duplicate the basic workings, I began to write the demo. The requirements of the demo were as follows. Create a game where one player would fight an AI opponent, allowing the following techniques: striking, grappling, and throwing. The game also required a simple CAW, create a wrestler, system. Over the course of about a month, the animation team successfully created idle, movement, strike, grapple, and 4 throw animations. They were very well done and required little effort to bring them into the engine. The demo took exactly 100 hours to program as soon as all the assets were ready and met all of the requirements mentioned above. This demo was to be presented to Telefilm Canada in order to obtain funding to create a fully featured game. After much work with Telefilm Canada, Dave was successful in being awarded what he claims to be in the order of $250,000 to create a wrestling game. So yeah, as the GameSpot article would indicate, PWX actually started off fairly competently. The artists and animators working for Dave were skilled and seemed to know what they were doing. And with the major coding work being done by this programmer, the whole package was good enough that Dave was able to obtain funding from a corporation. The programmer would not be staying on full-time, however. When Dave was awarded the funding, I was told that if I wanted to continue on the project, I would have to move to Vancouver. Being established in Toronto with a home and a job, I decided to refuse and wish them the best of luck. During this time, I have no idea how the money was spent or how the project was managed, as I was not present during that time at all. Okay, obviously that last note is a bit foreboding, but Dave has managed to establish a team that knows what they're doing. He has just attained a bunch of funding. So, find another programmer in British Columbia if that's what's needed, and continue development according to what you laid out in the GameSpot article. 6 years later, I then receive a phone call from Dave Wisnowski again. 6 years later? What the fuck? It was in 2010, if I recall correctly, when I received the call from Dave Wisnowski stating that he could not complete the game and was down to the last of the funding. He asked if I could finish the game for him for a small fee and a sharing profit of the game. I agreed to join what I thought was an endeavor of an indie game company. Everyone left the company, and the only people now were Dave, myself, and the web designer. Huh? What happened? Looking for information about what happened with PWX from 2006, so after the GameSpot interview, to 2010 leads to strange places. An IMDb page of all things, for example. The trivia page boasts the following factoid. During the initial design phase, a roster of over 120 characters was designed by Alec Talovich, representing a total of 8 different international wrestling organizations. A Ludo play for a story mode was also written, which would allow the player to plot a dynamic career path through the wrestling cultures of countries such as Japan, Canada, and Mexico. This iteration of the game was never realized due to budgetary constraints. Following Talovich's departure from the company in 2006, a new roster was created, featuring characters designed by various members of the art and programming team. For an unverifiable comment on a website that anyone could edit, there's still a specificity to this that makes me think it's in the realm of truth. And if so, 100 characters designed and then scrapped? I think we can add in here the narrative from the programmer to preemptively diagnose 2 issues with PWX just getting to launch. A failure at retaining talent, and a constant need to restart, with the former likely fueling the latter. The FAQ section of this IMDb page has a curious inquiry. Why has the game's production taken so long? Answer. The game has been funded entirely through independent financing sources in the interest of retaining all creative control over its content. Being that the end product will be a commercial quality title with a proprietary engine that must be built, the progress has been slow and steady with a projected Q4 2007 release. So, in the 2 years since the programmer left in 2007, there might already be brewing discontent with the slow progress of the game. But it seems as though Dave is no longer talking with any media around this time, at least that has been archived. Going back is just reliving the experience of one of those fans fed up with the current state of wrestling titles back in 2002, and heeded Dave's call to action, to gather around and support a new product that will take it all back. Nothing can be really found now, probably because nothing really was shared. I have to mention this, but the weirdest thing around this time is buried in the Wikipedia page of one Alan Jones. Styles. Fucking AJ Styles has credits as a technical consultant on PWX in 2008. It's probably safe to say that nothing good happened from 2006 to 2010. Money was spent, nothing could be shown, promises were made, fans and staff started getting impatient and leaving, and money was spent. I guess $250,000 doesn't get you as far as you otherwise might think. Where did the funding go? My assumption is to very banal sources. What I think, going off how Dave requested that the programmer relocate to Vancouver, is that there's some stipulation in the telefilm money that because it's supposed to support local industry, that the recipients be based locally. So, not out of your bedroom or your garage, but in a proper office building with a proper address. It's very, very, very likely that a significant amount of money was spent on just overhead alone, which is nightmarish for a project like this, and helps explain why the programmer returned to a team of 2 in 2010. Ultimately, taking that amount of money inadvertently sunk the reputation of PWX going forward. By taking that much money, even if it's a fraction of another game in the same genre's budget, and then not producing anything that could be played for so long, people will start calling your project a scam. Is that fair? Well, no, not really. But you have to understand that at this point, the narrative is starting to leave your hands, leave your control. And when that happens, you can't really fight it by doing interviews or giving statements or responding to comments without handicapping your reach. You deliver what you promised to your fans, and what you promised was the best wrestling game experience ever. So let's return to the programmer now in 2010, working on what seems like the 3rd demo of PWX, now titled Pro Wrestling X Uprising. What I was sent consisted of over 600 animations done in Maya and some type of demo with the latest Torque engine. The game itself was not fully playable and contained only about 70 animations. It could not be released as a game without still requiring a lot of work. Not knowing anything about the Torque engine, I decided to not use Torque, but to simply write an in-house engine. Ah, hell, bro. The original demo was made in Reality Factory, and then there was a proprietary engine for the supposed 2007 release. And then this demo that was made in Torque, and now they're going back to an in-house engine for the next release. Now, I'm not trying to discount the work of the artists who create the characters, the environments, the associated textures, and the animations, but you still don't have a game. It seems like so little of the work using the money that Dave said they spent in the GameSpot article has made it this far. Now, the programmer describes his reasons for using an in-house engine later on, but I'm going to be straight up with you here. If we're already at this point and a proprietary engine is being proposed, all I could think about is how long it's going to take for that to be coded, and also, are we going to be married to the specific programmer for the foreseeable future? I might just say it doesn't matter that we've worked together in the past. We've got to use something out of the box. Before I continue, I would just like to mention again that at this point in development, I was receiving no monetary payment of any kind and no support from the game artists at all. Aside from some menu art I received near the end of the project, I ended up doing this on my own for the rest of the next 2 years. The number one problem that PWX Uprising had from the very beginning was that it had no design document at all. Nothing but 5 words: make it like No Mercy. That's it. This, of course, brought up a number of problems. So, the purpose of the engine was to actually create a design document for a wrestling game. So let's just say that, purely hypothetically, my dream game would be a reboot of Mark Echo's Getting Up, Contents Under Pressure. Now, that game has problems, but nothing has really been made in the template of Getting Up since. So, parkour graffiti fighting game is really a genre of one. Mark Echo's Getting Up, Contents Under Pressure. It's still in the abstract, and you still really may not know what a fan would find fun about the whole experience. But from 2003 to 2010, there have been dozens of pro wrestling games, each one proposing a slightly different angle on the genre. So, unlike the Getting Up example, you're not exactly sailing blind. Therefore, I have to ask, was there no thought at all that the gameplay of No Mercy could be tweaked or modernized in the years since 2002? Was there no idea of something, anything, that could be taken from the years of Smackdown or SVR releases, from the 2 Day of Reckoning games on the GameCube, for even the fucking TNA Impact game on the Xbox 360, that could be added to the experience? The programmer then goes on to describe the issues of exporting and implementing the animations. From what he describes, it appears that the quality of the animation work didn't necessarily decline, but oversight to ensure efficiency was no longer as present. The majority of animations issues seem to come from a simple lack of supervision while they were being made. Now, after basically restarting game development again, it took another 2 years to get something that could be played. By almost mid-November 2012, the game was finally at a point where all the necessary game mechanics were added. A single player could fight AI inside and outside of the ring, or 2 players could wrestle each other. Other features in the game had the base code added so that we could quickly send out updates for them. The entire plan was to build a game with a community that could rely on updates that they actually request, and to make better games for this community using these requests. With this being the case, many files were left editable by a mod program that a fan could write, or they could use the built-in game feature to change character textures. So now a demo and a release were packaged for the announcement of a release date. It's interesting in 2012 that they were thinking of this kind of piecemeal release schedule for the game. Like, it will release as a demo and then evolve into a game with subsequent tweaks. It's very contemporary. It's also pretty forward-thinking to think of the game as like a template for expression at code level, but, if a game has modding support in a forest and no one's around, does it make a sound? But anyway, now they had something that once again could be shown. With the well run dry on funding, this might be now or never. Your last chance to salvage fans' confidence that yes, during these past 7 years we were making something, and what we've got to show you will convince you that it was all worth waiting for. And gaining back fan goodwill is likely your only path at this point to a successful and supported product. Soon afterwards, I call Dave and he tells me that he announced a release. However, within an hour of the release, he says he was notified by the legal department of Garage Games to cease any sales of PWX Uprising and state the following demand: that they want the source code in 30 days to examine it. Garage Games was the company behind Torque Engine, by the way. I'm not sure what this is about or how this could have happened, taking the programmer at their word. Why did Garage Games think that this indie title was cutting them off while still using their property? I have no idea. At this point, I remained very adamant that 2 years of my source code isn't going to be handed over to anyone. After what seemed to be a few back and forth talks between Dave and his lawyer, the issue seemed to be then resolvable by Garage Games simply by examining the demo for 10 business days. No matter how hard I demanded that Dave send me some type of documentation that showed this, he did not produce any such evidence to me, with a final statement that he was taking his lawyer's word for all of this. It wasn't going to bother him about it. All this legal jargon happened about a week prior to Dave beginning a 30-day Kickstarter campaign to raise $15,000 in donations. Oh boy, a Kickstarter. Now, I'm kind of happy to join the class of YouTube video makers that have had to do the song and dance before, but yes, Kickstarter is a viable way of raising capital. Just because there are many, many examples that run the gamut from pie-in-the-sky pipe dream to, vaporware to out-and-out scam doesn't mean that Kickstarter itself is a red flag. But for this example, it's like, of course they went to Kickstarter. In Dave's voice, I'm assuming, the purpose of the Kickstarter is one last funding push to get something that they can sell. As I said before, the game is pretty much in ship or quit mode at this point. But they are saying that the hard part has been done. Any funds collected will be going towards rebooting the visuals through updated textures and animations. But the tone of this Kickstarter just has to be mentioned. It's edging right on the side of dire. Like, it's been a wild, absurd ride to get to this point, for which they advertise some sort of associated media will be made at some point, like a documentary, like the fucking Apocalypse Now documentary. The team has struggled mightily to this point, but wants to assure the reader and prospective backer that they will continue to fight on no matter what. But as a spectator, that's rather thick. It's a hard sell with a slice of desperation on top. It's kind of like if you were approached on the street with this type of pitch, you would probably be like, oh yeah, that's good luck with that, buddy. Now, for the $15 donation tier and up, WGU will send backers the digital download to PWX Uprising, along with the pending full game. So, the demo wasn't directly purchasable, it just came as a reward for backing the project. Alright, let's think of this as another piece of market research. After so long, how many fans finally wanted to play this game? Over 9 years since it was first announced. Subtracting the total backers from the 9 backers in the $4 coffee tier, and you get 398, contributing $21,907 against a goal of $75,000. Wait, that's not $15,000. Either way, the Kickstarter failed, and because of how it was structured, they walked away with nothing. But they promised to keep their chin up in the final update. They learned a lot, and they'll be back stronger and better before. That's what you have to say when you're in a situation like this. But fuck that. There's a demo out. One that's been in the oven with a couple of miscues, slowly baking and being taken out and remade and put back in to bake again, and being taken out and remade and put back in to bake again. Let's see the fruits of their efforts. Let's see Pro Wrestling X Uprising, courtesy again of New Legacy Inc.
I'm fucking grappling her, and it's fucking not letting me do it.
In a game.
The chair is the ref.
The ref's out. Ask him. Her.
Ask it.
Hey,
Why is there?
do you think she has a shooting star press
God,
finisher?
why is this fucking camera still going?
Shooter is called the Canadian Hammerlock.
Ow! He hit fucking how?
Hey,
Sa-
The Kemper Arena that.
Oh, god damn it. God damn it.
Graffiti.
This Canadian flag has more animation in it than this game does.
2001.
No, Elfface, I legitimately had no expectations going in. I didn't think it was going to be good or bad. But you can't tell me that this is good, and you can't tell me this is what you expected out of 10 years. Seriously, dude. I'm not all for just bashing it for the sake of bashing it, but dude, 10 years for that? Come on, dude.
Okay, so that's not very good. At what point do you give up on the idea of Pro Wrestling X? Now, I don't mean give up on making a video game. I'm not even saying give up on making a pro wrestling game. But I mean specifically Pro Wrestling X. No Mercy 2 on the PC with the best graphics, the best gameplay, the most customization, etc. A thing that's supposed to be everything to everyone and every wish to bring back a classic from the early 2000s. Not only was that not enough to crowdfund the capital necessary to continue development, but in many ways you couldn't deliver anything close to what that dream would be. The relationship between the programmer and Dave would soon deteriorate. Needless to say, Dave was not very happy about the Kickstarter not producing anything. But with a bit of encouragement that the release will be the start of something that can continue and grow, we get back to talking about releasing the game and demo. At this point, I once again felt that this was an indie team of developers who were determined to bring the PWX community the game they've been waiting almost 10 years for. All that had to be done now was announce a release date, release a demo and game, and start to get lots of feedback. On around December 14th, 2012, Dave finally releases the game but does not release the free demo. The release announcement of PWX had no announcement of a release date that would build to a final release day. It was simply listed on the main PWX page that the game could now be purchased. The sales page consisted of being able to purchase the game for $5 or donate amounts ranging from $15 to $500 to help make the next game. There was no link to any demo, and the page itself literally spoke about how bad the game was. Dave and I became very verbal and argumentative over the next 2 weeks. This is where I began to feel I was completely not part of any type of indie team and might just ending up being made a fool of. I give Dave one more chance to show that we were actually a team, and that was to simply see if he would honor his payment agreement. On January 4th, 2013, Dave sent me the first payment from 2 years of work. Although the game didn't make much in sales, which is completely fine, it ended up that the payment agreement was also a play on words. Right there, I joined the ranks of many programmers and artists over the years who were exploited for their work only to get legal jargon in payment. As the old saying goes, shame on me. Needless to say, I was then very upset about the whole situation. Becoming even more argumentative with Dave, I tried to make sense of the situation, trying to levity things, but to no avail at all. Well, since I never sent Dave the source code, I simply told him he would not be getting any more work out of me and I won't be supplying updates. After 2 weeks of frustrating arguments, I finally received a letter that so many others have received before me. It simply stated that Dave is ceasing all relations with me and if I have any questions to pose them to his lawyer. Now I was legally removed from PWX altogether. Dave makes no mention to the community that he does not have the source code and that is why there will be no further updates. I try to inform the community of this only to have the post deleted and the account banned, in some cases within minutes. But if that wasn't the end, I then became the sacrificial lamb who was being demonized by the PWX community. Referred to as a crazed and convicted felon who is too incompetent to supply any updates. Any attempt to defend myself was of course met with the common forum manipulation that I was used to. Deletion of posts and banning of the account. Okay, so we need to table this because there is a rebuttal and a clarification to what the programmer has said from a longtime employee of WishboneX/WGU. But before all that, I just gotta say this. Even though PWX Uprising looks like nothing that I would like to spend my time playing, this just makes me so fucking frustrated. Like, even if the programmer is just trying to save face here. Like, WGU has just shipped something, and Dave cut ties with the programmer and forfeited the work. That's 2 more years of development time and money just gone down the drain, with nothing to build on or iterate from. All you've done is just add another link to this crazy PWX development story that you're surely making a documentary or fucking book about. 2 more years later, PWX is back on Kickstarter. The goal is a lot more modest this time, assuring that if a similar amount of support is received as the last Kickstarter, they'll walk away with the money. They got very close to the same amount of money pledged in 2012, now against a goal of $6,400. And yes, it looks way different than the last iteration. Unfortunately, and yeah, this is super cynical, but like, this idea of learning from the last Kickstarter attempt to come back stronger simply means lowering the bar the next go-around so that you'll know that you'll clear it. According to the Kickstarter page, the silver lining of PWX Uprising is that they were able to gain the support to get started on the main game, now just Pro Wrestling X. Incredibly, the best fans in the world saw the potential in an admittedly rough game, and their financial support got us the reboot we badly needed. Thanks to our supporters, we're developing on a new engine, we have new development tools, and we're able to hire additional team members. The new crew have taken our humble project to an amazing new level. According to the What You Are Backing section, Pro Wrestling X seems to have regressed to not being much of a game at this point, listing out a checklist of the barest groundwork for the first iteration, the alpha of this title. Movement, standard D-pad, directional movement, running Irish whips, climb turnbuckle, enter, exit, ring to the floor, block, parry, escape, think no mercy, pick up downed opponent, taunt, pin and fall attempt. You see how this goes. Extras, 2 playable characters, 1 base arena. In addition to this Kickstarter, PWX was also submitted to Steam's old green light program and was successfully listed, thus amplifying the game's reach. Now, despite being successful in this crowdfunding round, tantamount to the first break this game's gotten since like 2005, and being open about their crazy extended history, if you know the story so far, it all still looks kind of awful. This is the game that's been in development for a decade. It took $250,000 in government corporate money or something like that, has been a ghost ship for years, had a failed Kickstarter, and finally shipped an awful product. When you ask for more money going forward, that does kind of put you in scam territory for your audience. So when attempts are made to promote the new crowdfunding attempt, you get things like this. A Reddit post on the r/2bestfriendsplay subreddit. Pro Wrestling X, the Aki/Fire Pro Wrestling inspired game discussed on last podcast, might be a scam. Interestingly enough, when a user referenced the words of the programmer, Eric Schmidt, who has been with Dave since the beginning it seems, serving as webmaster, graphic designer, and social media manager, responded, "Hi gang, this is Eric, the web guy behind Pro Wrestling X, and it looks like there's some myths that have to be busted about this project. I've stayed away from Reddit because I know how they just love people posting their Kickstarters, but when I see people deliberately posting misinformation, it's always the same 5 guys, it's time to step in. I've been with the game over 10 years now, so I'm actually in a position to provide some actual facts." Alright, so, in my opinion, Eric doesn't make himself look very good here. Alright, let's be realistic here though. This is a reply to a reply on a subreddit, and the comment itself got like 9 upvotes. It's quite likely that his reply will be viewed more in this video than in the original posting. By the way, that's not like a factor of its success or failure. I'm just saying that like, alright, I'm going to be trying to give him as much credit as anyone else in this story. Myth number 1, this is a scam. False. The idea that Dave is sitting high atop a secret volcano hideaway, petting his cat, viewing the world through a monocle, plotting ways to steal money from gullible wrestling fans, is absurd. Yeah, man, of course, dog. This ridiculous fiction that you came up with to try to show that Dave wasn't acting maliciously by trying to paint criticisms of him as absurd is in fact absurd. I'm sorry to do this here, by the way. Like I said, I'm trying to give him as much credit as anyone else in the story. When this project was started, Dave didn't know anything about game development. Zilch. He's not a programmer or an artist, just a fan. He was, to be blunt, a noob. Noobs make mistakes, noobs choose poorly on developers, noobs get sucked into the excitement of the potential of a game without knowing the economic realities. Eyes bigger than the proverbial stomach? We're not shy about admitting these mistakes. Why on earth do you think we keep going? Because we made a promise and we're going to fulfill it. Anyone that gave us money from 2005 to 2012 gets anything we ever make for free for life. People who bought Uprising and went above and beyond will be taken care of. Want to spell this out too. Anyone who has given us any amount of dollars has always been entitled to a refund if they no longer think the project is going to happen. Just email us and we'll make it happen. Come on guys, the money wasn't squirreled away, it was merely squandered. I will say though, it is commendable that Eric said that they would offer refunds if anyone was, concerned or discontented with the direction that the project was headed, or frustrated that it had taken so long. But of course, I don't know if any refund requests were sent or honored. I mean, at this point, everything is just words in this video. Myth number 2, we stole money from the Canadian government. False. Back in 2006, Dave managed to secure a loan, not a grant, through Telefilm Canada. He did what game devs are supposed to do: hire a crew, lease office space, buy equipment. That burns through cash fast. The loan was not given all at once, it was distributed in phases. And when the politics of the Canadian government changed, they decided funding a wrestling game was not the best use of tax dollars. The funding stopped. Layoffs ensued and the project was stuck. Myth number 3, Dave doesn't pay his devs. Anyone who has actually worked with us has always been taken care of, and we're on great terms with all of our former employees, except for one. Yes, that rant you linked earlier is indeed from the programmer who was responsible for the glorious game Uprising. His view of history, however, is a bit cloudy. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. Dev gets all our remaining cash up front for Uprising. Dev promises completion in 3 months. Dev takes 3 years. When our first Kickstarter failed, we had $0, and decided out of desperation to release Uprising with the hopes that people saw enough potential to kick us a few dollars. Dev cuts his own deal for a percentage of sales, one that, in his mind, would pay him more than the other two people left. When the actual dollars came in, he realized he calculated wrong and flipped his lid. He refused to update the game and held the code for ransom. In his rant, he leaves out the late-night voicemails to Dave threatening his family. Would you guys put up with that for a video game? Seriously, guys, this dev is not the horse you want to back. Lots of personal demons. But he is a dad, and we have never outed him publicly or tried to bury his rep. Myth number 4. Uprising was a piece of crap that never got updated. Sigh, confirmed. We own this and it's embarrassing. We didn't have enough cash for a plan B, a backup programmer. When the dev took his ball and went home, we were completely boned. We had the full roadmap planned out and it had to be flushed down the toilet. What shocked us about Uprising was its popularity regardless of quality. Sales weren't enough to build that volcano hideaway, but it was enough for us to hire a kick-ass artist and port things over to a new engine. That's where we are today, gang. We're a much smarter team now. Are there more mistakes coming? Likely. That's the nature of game development. But we keep going. Lesser, probably smarter people would have quit years ago. If anyone has any questions, please ask them. And if you think we're full of crap, that's okay too. Don't back us, don't buy the products, get your refund if you have given us cash in the past. We understand completely. But enough with the character assassination. Dave's a stand-up guy who owns his mistakes and has kept going. Hey Eric, listen, this video, I'm not trying to directly address like one person, you know. That's not really my intent. But I do have to say this. Eric, what the hell are you doing here, man? Like, listen, if you want to defend Dave's effort, that's good on you. You're being a good friend. But this is probably the worst idea that you could have had. If you just let the sleeping dog lie and just let the programmer's comments stand, I mean, they make Dave look kind of duplicitous and spiteful, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it paints him as incompetent. The big revelation from his post is that the game that the public thought was in development for 10 years was really coded in 2 to 3. His words versus yours. But instead, Dave sounds like he has absolutely no idea what he's doing, because he was given a 3-month turnaround time for Uprising and gave him 3 years. That's fucking ridiculous. When during that period did you or Dave not know that the project wasn't going to be completed on time? When did you learn that it wasn't going to be the quality that you expected? And when did you learn that the programmer had these personal demons that negatively affected his work and the team? Did it come overnight? Fucking, oh my god. So Dave doesn't know when to put his foot down, so Dave can't assess what state deliverables are in, so Dave can't evaluate talent, so Dave can't provide feedback. So in 10 years as project lead, Dave still hasn't learned how to lead a project? And Eric, you don't look too hot either here, because this isn't the type of project where everyone contributes equally to the end result. You are the web, social, and graphics guy, and that is labor. I'm not trying to undercut that. But if there's no programmer, there's no game. But surprise, surprise, Pro Wrestling X isn't the product of one person who has a loose affiliation to WGU. It's as much as his project as it is yours and Dave's. So here, honesty and transparency doesn't mean owning Uprising's mediocrity only after it released, after it failed, and after this breakup. So both you and Dave probably should have known during that time that Uprising wasn't going well, and no one put their foot down. No one cut ties? How am I supposed to trust that you guys are going to be doing right going forward? Because honestly, what programmer would want to work with you guys after reading something like that? Because the proposition here is that you're not only going to be doing all of the work to drag PWX across the finish line, but you're also going to be shouldering blame publicly if things don't go well. And that's no money in your free time, compensation if/when the game ever releases. So yeah, you probably shouldn't have said anything. You probably should have just let it go. Perhaps I'm giving undue weight to Eric's response, but just reading that statement, that's where Uprising just turns from a simple misstep in PWX's development to an out-and-out fiasco. Okay, so after restarting development again, in November of 2014, Pro Wrestling X entered into early access on Steam, where it's remained to this day. We have that video that I showed from New Legacy Inc. back in 2017. Now knowing the history of PWX, let's take stock of this build of the game. There's 5 match types, with one, the cage match, being way more unique from the other 4 in terms of an entirely different rule set and win qualifier. There's a roster of 13 wrestlers, some sharing attire parts, which is fine, but why 13? Full entrance animations in the Aki style, which is pretty funny. Walk, taunt, enter ring, taunt. For clarification, No Mercy lacked full entrance animations, which is one of its few knocks. Match gameplay looks pretty sludgy, not helped by rapid swings and FPS. The AI of the opponent is basic. It follows, it occasionally attacks, and annoyingly enough, treats every run towards it by the player as a rebound to an Irish whip, leading to a counter grapple. This version of the game has two interesting gimmicks. The sides of the stage can be climbed, which to me harkens back to the absurdity of climbing stages in the Smackdown games. There's also ragdoll physics when falling from higher places. The latter is incredibly amusing, especially in a pro wrestling game, that someone would just surrender all knowledge of how to fall the best they can. Fuck it, if I compound fracture my leg in front of 10,000 people, I will. Another fascinating thing is when Johnny of New Legacy Inc. plays the cage match type. Within moments, the AI gives up any pretense of having a wrestling match and attempts to escape the cage, which is the objective of a cage match, of course. But anyone who has ever played a cage match or a ladder match in a wrestling game will tell you that the worst way for this match to go is for the player to have to incessantly puppy guard the computer against their single-minded determination to not have any fun whatsoever. They don't want to engage you, they don't want to go for the high-risk spots that make these matches thrilling in real life, they just want to win. You want to know what game has that same AI? Fucking WrestleMania 18, the game that served as the catalyst for Dave to turn from disgruntled fan to game designer. It's weird how it all comes full circle. In this iteration, there's not so much a start-from-scratch CAW system as there is a wrestler edit feature. At this point, however, the part and move bank is so small that this is kind of a proof of concept more than a feature that'd be useful at this point of the game. Released from the grips of that incompetent dev that he still kept on board for years from 2010, this showing is not terribly much better in how it looks. In fact, it might be running worse than how it did previously. Let's now move to 2021, where the New Legacy Inc. boys are revisiting PWX once again, with a couple rounds of updates since. It does look promising at first with a pretty good UI. The roster has been cut down to 8 wrestlers, which is even weirder than 13 wrestlers sharing many of the same parts. We've got tables, and the tables have their own breakaway physics. Tables also add in their own unique challenges. Aside from that, improvements are few and far between, with in many ways more problems than the previous build. It seems like the AI has taken a step back, leading to more bugs and glitches. What results is little honest engagement with the product as a viewer. It's still slow and the computer puts up the barest resistance to your offense. It might be appropriate to call it kind of a wrestling sandbox around this iteration. So again, not much of a game here. So, since the uprising disaster of 2012, with so much learned from the demo and so much gained from the Kickstarter, we have 9 more years of development. But after all that time, we still have a game with no real features on first glance that would tell a prospective customer that this is something that they might enjoy. Let alone be that fantastic game that brings no mercy back, now 2 decades after that game first released. Now that's a lot that I covered, and it's time to experience it firsthand. An update was made in the last quarter of 2024. It's time to boot up Pro Wrestling X. I am not super happy about this. Okay, so let's hop right into the career mode, the single player campaign for Pro Wrestling X. This definitely wasn't done by accident, by the way, as if I somehow managed to go blind to the giant quick match option on the left-hand side. Whatever, the music was very loud and I panicked. We have 8 wrestlers from the 2021 build. Now, just to make this clear, I appreciate the amount of detail the player models have been given, with appliques on their attire and prominent vascularity throughout their body. If the base model came from a package or a program, someone joked Poser Wrestling X at one point, there is work here to build from the template. If these were built closer to scratch, then good job to the artist. Tirador, who has taken a role as one of the game's mascots, has a lot going on and causes some slowdown whenever he's selected. Anyway, choose your fighter and buckle up. It's going to get loud.
Introducing first.
Holy shit, it's loud! Against the 2021 build of this game, it does play a lot quicker than I thought it might with a stable 50 frames per second. I'm not sure if this is the game being put into a more optimized state or me having a more powerful computer, but I didn't experience the sludgy pace that might otherwise have turned players off at first blush. This build comes with 3 arenas, 2 that are kind of generic but look fine, and 1 that's based off the old WCW Halloween Havoc sets, which is always welcome. I also think the crowds look great too. A button to strike, tap for a quick strike, hold for a power strike. Run with the Y button and attack for a running attack, of course, which sometimes will land. You have 2 grapple states, weak and strong, by tapping or holding the B button, each with 5 possible moves. These are neutral, up, left, down, and right plus B, meaning you have 10 front grapples maximum per character, which is not a lot. Just for context, No Mercy had neutral, up, down, and left and right directions plus the A or B buttons on both weak and strong grapples, for a total of 16. Anyway, you have 2 back grapple moves, weak and strong, so don't fucking waste them. There are 4 ground grapple moves at the head and at the feet in either supine or face down. There are counter grapples, aka rebound moves or moves from the Irish Whip, but the timing for them is not intuitive. There might be some overcompensation here from the prior builds, like there might be too much buffer in what constitutes a run state, a button press, and when the game recognizes it. Like, I'm just talking out of my ass here, but either way, they're finicky and you'll likely miss. And I'm ignoring the run animation. Okay, it's very dorky, doesn't look athletic, instead looking very idiosyncratic. There is a turnbuckle state and a top rope state, so you can do buckle moves and top rope aerial moves. You can go onto the apron and do moves from there. An issue for me, right off the bat, the screen shakes with strikes and some grapples to convey impact. And if you're going to go for that, a top rope move, a fall from the cage, or a finisher is where I'd use it only. Otherwise, PWX feels imprecise to play and looks clunky outside of the core lockup grapples. Some are animation issues, some are collision issues. I got smacks of the Legends of Wrestling series, WCW Mayhem, some of the Acclaim wrestling titles, excluding their bizarro fighting game button combo system. These games had generally well-animated grapples and stiff, blocky, everything else. So PWX is in a state that isn't uncommon, where things that depend on control, physics, and collision, so anything that isn't a grapple feels off and looks worse. It's not awful to play, but it is middling to play. Is there anything that surprised me? I damaged my opponent's arm, and they kept that selling animation from standing to lying down through even running. That's an interesting idea to carry over to the wrestling pundits, the smart marks of us out here who'll criticize a wrestler for selling a body part like death, and then give it up once that story beat passes. Also, wrestlers bleed. This build uses a unity effect that I've seen in other games, but it's effective. It's like the base for this was like Eddie Guerrero versus JBL levels of blood loss. Like, that was the minimum threshold. Look at the canvas here. It's so gross. There are allegedly finishing moves, but I'll elaborate on this a bit later. One of the big gimmicks for Pro Wrestling X, I think, was the implementation of ragdoll physics. Now it seems more bracketed in a way. If you pick up an opponent and they are groggy, you might see a graphic pop up saying ragdoll, indicating that they will go limp with the next strike. I'm not a fan of this pop-up. I think this is a funny thing that should be discovered. Like, when you see it here, it feels like it's threatening to be made more of a bigger deal than what it actually is across any particular match. There are real celebrations this time around. So, you know. The general tone of this game is irreverent, kind of dumb metalhead. Like, that's the soundtrack to this game. There's some crassness, and a general, yeah, we know shit don't work sometimes. Signs held by the fans are knowingly rude. Blow me with an NES cartridge. Your mother is my finisher. This is all a pretty tight package as far as flavor goes for a wrestling game, but I think I would look on it more favorably if this was like your second or third release within a year of going to early access. Knowing the history of this game, it does kind of leave an off taste in my mouth. Like seeing a sign in the crowd flat out admitting that the pin mechanic might be busted. Like, fucking fix it then. What's the problem? Speaking of the game's vibe, there's an air around this game that reeks of deathmatch wrestling, hardcore wrestling, garbage wrestling, or else, wrestling that prizes violence, weapons, extreme risk, and bloodshed very highly. Is it because there's a fluorescent light tube in this game, the deathmatch weapon? I will say that weapon striking feels very convincing, and there are breakaway physics for things like light tubes and for tables. It does look pretty good. It kind of makes you wish you could, slam someone onto the broken glass and they get shards stuck in them. There is a ring designer here, which is cute. To my amusement, one of the rings is the shittiest backyard ring in recent memory. It's so awesome, but sadly, the barbed wire ropes and the cardboard covered mats don't add anything extra to gameplay. Man, the create a wrestler or edit roster feature is pretty bare bones. You have over 24 or so empty slots to play with. I hope that can be increased because that's a roster limit unseen since, like, the 5th generation of consoles. Profile has you give your character a name, height, weight, country of origin, and theme song. The height and weight in the profile section don't actually correlate to your wrestler's model. You have to set that in the body and skin tab. That's not good, but it's far from the game's biggest problems. The body and skin tab has basic body customization, nothing really to note as an inclusion. There's no advanced morphing, face geometry is preset, and hair options are pretty much limited to the pre-made roster of original characters. Attire has modeled options and texture options. Curiously enough, some of the modeled parts do not scale with increased proportions of the character model. I don't know if that's a thing with like a checkbox that forgot to get ticked on or off. For the gentlemen out there, I'll know you'll appreciate the ability to give your wrestlers some of the smallest and skimpiest trunks I've ever seen in a wrestling game. And you're probably thinking it, so I'll go ahead and say it. Wrestler models in PWX are bulged out like crazy, and it's very distracting. But am I complaining? That's up for you to decide. I was pleased to see character models in the Move List tab, but there's not a lot here at all. I count 21 front-facing grapple moves, 6 back grapple moves, and 1 grapple move each for at head face up, at head face down, at feet face up, and at feet face down. Strikes are in an even sorrier state, with 7 weak strikes, 8 strong strikes, 2 aerial strikes each to standing or downed opponents, and 2 running strikes. Some moves have no options other than the default. I don't need to tell you that's a paltry move list despite them looking pretty good and impactful. Not only is there not enough moves here to really differentiate one wrestler from another, but by having so many front grapple slots, there might not be enough for your own character or Real Wrestler CAW to even differentiate your finisher from your regular arsenal. That's why I said there were allegedly finishers in this game. Interestingly enough though, there are many taunts. Taunts are probably way easier to get into the game, but I think there might be as many taunts as total move animations. How few moves there are just bums me out so much. In the pie chart of Pro Wrestling X's total development time, I think the biggest slice would be animation work, and like a percentage of it made it to this release. I'm not even sure how much of the backlog of this game is even usable in Unity. Maybe none. I think a developer would say, yeah, that's why you get the basic groundwork in place in code before spending so much time and money on a bank of animations. They might have put the cart before the horse here. I would probably say that is a top priority for this game. You have characters that can move and lock up and refer to a list of what they can do, and you have various states coded in, so I might just concentrate on getting as much shit into the move list as possible. The other thing I would suggest is perhaps developing the striking. Like, you have weak and heavy strikes, but I think there should be strike combos, distance modifiers, maybe even interruptions. Like a couple of different weak strikes that you can use for close up, a couple from mid-range, and like a kick from far away. The reason for this is because striking is probably what the player will do first when picking up this game and entering a match. So firing off a dozen of the same jab or shin kick without pause, it's not going to result in a good first impression. Ultimately, the issue is a lack of options, which the Create a Wrestler feature exposes. Your part options are pretty much limited to what's already been made for the game, the parts custom made for the original roster. While they are detailed, the parts have a specific design that won't really apply to any other wrestler. That's hard to find a reason to use this system in the current build outside of goofing around. And that's a shame, because this Create a Wrestler system is something that's been planned since the beginning. But it does go a little bit further than that. Lack of options also means a lack of wrestling styles. Basically, does it really matter how much effort you put into the visuals of each wrestler if they all control the same and do the same moves? In the 2017 build, there was a perfunctory effort to designate styles, but, you know, everyone's got the Pro Resu style, so I guess not. Okay, so Pro Wrestling X has always had a second game reference as part of its equation for the perfect wrestling game. And I talked a little bit about No Mercy, and we'll be doing so more. But there's also Fire Pro Wrestling. I'm going to be doing a very quick flyover of it, so don't think I'm not giving it the respect it's due, but it's for a reason. Fire Pro Wrestling is a long-standing Japanese wrestling game series. I think its first entry in the States was Fire Pro Wrestling on the Game Boy Advance in 2001, which I had. And I think Fire Pro is known for primarily its sprite-based artwork, its huge roster of copyright-free wrestlers, and having insane levels of customization. I don't even know what I could say to properly represent its depth. Like, you can set CPU logic at a granular level, like an almost pedantic amount of specificity for how your wrestler should behave. The Steam release, Fire Pro Wrestling World, comes with a free DLC utility called Movecraft, where you can create and edit move animations and taunts. It is by no means easy. Just looking at clips to edit in for this video, it just makes my eyes glaze over. And it feels very at home for the spirit of Fire Pro Wrestling. Like some of the earlier WWE games would have create a finisher or create a taunt, but those seem tacked on, like back-of-the-box feature plays, and only really amounting to another thing that players could exploit. Now, I don't think there's consensus for how much people enjoy playing the game in a match, controller in hand. As a kid, I don't think I ever got a grasp on it, but people would probably say you can't play it like Smackdown. You have to be very tactical, you have to choose your moves wisely. However, there's another aspect of Fire Pro today. I think you'll find that many people enjoy it just for creating wrestlers, match simming, in the booker or promotion mode. In that case, it's a super mega nerd offering. And with even the subsection of wrestling game fans, it's tricky for some players to wrap their head around the whole concept, even if they can get beyond the sprite-based artwork. So, No Mercy, a rather frictionless 3D experience, plus Fire Pro would be very enticing. Bringing up Fire Pro before this felt unfair and obvious, but I might as well just lay it out now. Fire Pro Wrestling is so far outside of the scope of where this game is at right now. If that idea is a burger, then the cattle hasn't been born yet, and the seeds for the wheat have just been planted. Even as something that they were aiming for, even with Fire Pro referenced directly in the Steam description of this game, I'm inclined to simply ignore that part as we move forward in this review. There are some moments of fun to be had in some of the gimmick match stipulations that the game has added. We have a cell match here, and color me surprised, you can leave the cell, climb up the walls, and fight on top of the structure. Enough slams on the cell roof and it will give way.
Oh, fuck!
Those are all expectations for cell matches since Smackdown 2, and they've all been checked off. Scaffold matches are here, and we're talking about the ECW or XPW scaffold matches. The opposite would be the WCW ones, where it's more like capture the flag. The goal for these is the first wrestler to knock their opponent off the scaffold wins. This is a pretty good implementation of the ragdoll mechanic, as the loading screen says it's easier to knock a stunned opponent off, which is kind of crazy, but it also works as intended.
Hell yeah! Oh.
Holy shit, there's a Taipei deathmatch stipulation here. Oh my god. For those who don't know, and there's next to no way you would know this otherwise, Taipei death matches started in Extreme Championship Wrestling. The first match saw a face-off between former brothers Axel Rotten, RIP, and Ian Rotten, Scumbag. The match stipulation involves the participants wrapping their hands in tape and then getting broken glass affixed onto it. And not gimmicked, by the way. Broken glass. Like beer bottle glass. It's fucking gnarly. The thrill of this match is seeing someone get cut up good and dripping ketchup all over the fucking ring. And it's here in Pro Wrestling X, which is probably definitely a first. Problem is, your character may not have a punch equipped. But if they do...
Oh, fuck. Okay.
So that's fun for a second or two, and I know I sound like a complete damn squib for saying that, but it's simply immediate bloodshed with the Taipei death match versus delayed bloodshed with any other match. And in PWX there's only one type, full coast to coast, probably hit an artery, probably dying. If this game didn't have its history and wasn't in this state, I'd almost suggest going all in on a deathmatch game. That's a niche that really hasn't been served since the two backyard wrestling games on the PS2, and they neither foot the bill entirely nor are favorably looked upon. To say the very fucking least. They are also lamentably products of their time, deciding to go with the classic 2000s combination of questionable or else violent material with softcore of like late night Girls Gone Wild advertisements. It's skeezy meets sleazy, and the results, they fucking reek, bro. You would probably get a lot more mileage out of a deathmatch game with a surprisingly deep and mechanically diverse engine under the hood than the current offering. I think the deathmatch approach would also match the appeal of a company like Combat Zone Wrestling. Sure, that company does the cage of death matches, 10,000 thumbtacks, the barbed wire, the glass, all of the fucking light tubes. But they also did these very athletic contests with thrilling back and forth exchanges. As a kid, I remember downloading CZW matches on LimeWire and seeing moves I had never seen before. And even wrestlers that did compete in those blood and guts style matches did go on to find prominence and even world titles in the mainstream. Also, bars to access content are way lower than what they were back in 2005. I don't think you'd have to worry about anything being too far for a game like this. That project could have legs, and maybe even some of the CCW, MLW, GCW, or IWA guys would sign on. However, I would say I would like a much more complex damage and bloodshed system than what's currently in the game. The perils of deathmatch wrestling start at scars from broken glass and barbed wire, through to severed arteries, up through potential limb loss, and beyond. And I think that should all be in play here. So fuck it, let me mother effing bomb someone off a building. And the results should be catastrophic. Checking the PWX Patreon, I do see an update that's scheduled for 2025 that seems to allude to this a little bit. I don't really want to show it here because it is gated for followers. I think I can get away with just describing it. It's an aesthetic component that wouldn't look too out of place at a GCW or CZW show. I'll just say that. And I think that's kind of a unique offering that I would support. I like that way more than the glossy, big budget, high production value, big screen, big set presentation that the game has currently. It's like carrying water for the biggest promotions without any of their lore, or, their money. It gives off the air that pro wrestling happens in these arenas because you see it on television. But wrestling often happens in parking lots and gymnasiums and 1,000-capacity mixed-use business centers. And yes, indeed, in backyards. When you play that in a WWE game, it's almost always treated as an undignified stepping stone to the bright lights of Raw, Smackdown, and through to WrestleMania. Remember when you were doing the job in front of a dozen schmucks and some dump kid? Now look at you now, millions are watching you. But it is dignified. Not beholden to any image or license, I would appreciate that unglamorous, super far behind the curtain approach to this game. The current presentation feels like too much kayfabe, and I don't get any charge from what look like generic but high-budget television wrestling sets. It also is a direction for a game that in many ways is still looking for it, and on the surface looks like a wannabe WWE 2K. Two muscly action figures in Unity. But that's essentially asking for a completely different game and another overhaul of core mechanics. Speaking of which, I didn't touch on that at all, so let's get back to career mode. For this first match, I was told it was a submission match, so pins don't count. That was probably a lie, or, a graphical bug, as it showed up in the next match, but pins were enabled. In fact, that's how I won. But to win via submission in any wrestling game, it always tends to be more laborious, despite the general methodology being the same. You just beat the guy up until one of your holds causes him to tap out. So just repeat the hold over and over again. In games with more specified limb damage, this might mean doing more limb moves, but generally, similar process for a similar result. This did give me a small peek into the AI of Pro Wrestling X that wasn't experienced later on in the career mode. There, it was all too easy to do what I wanted to win the match. So Pro Wrestling X implements the Spirit Meter system from Aki Titles. The Spirit Meter represents momentum in the match, and it's one of the ways to try to adapt the logic of pro wrestling to a video game. Sustained offense will fill the meter until it starts flashing. When activated by a taunt, it represents a surge in adrenaline, and a state where you can pull off your finishing move. Being on the back foot drains the meter until you get to a temporary danger state, where you are much more vulnerable to offense, to being submitted, to being pinned, to losing the match. However, there is a bit more to it, as certain things are meant to signal that momentum is changing from one participant to the other. In the general WWE North American style, the basic logic for a pro wrestling match is that the heel or bad guy grinds down the babyface or good guy through moves and holds and shortcuts and cheating. Several times during the match, the face will attempt to turn the tables only to be brought back into the heel's control. These are defined enough to have their own terminology, hope spots, and cutoffs. In this scenario, the actual sequence that leads to the face performing their finisher and winning the match is their comeback. So, the spirit meter system adapts to this. In No Mercy, for instance, momentum will often build with the wrestler on offense despite comeback attempts from the other wrestler. They get cut off, essentially, and on harder difficulties, this will likely be you. But if you gallop out early, hit your finisher, and continue the match, you'll likely find it more difficult to remain on offense, as the computer will increase their output. Even in a game, spectator logic can fill in the blanks. Oh, they're desperate, they realize that they are in danger. To any other game, we'd call that rubber banding. In this first match in Pro Wrestling X, the band snapped back quite hard after I got to max spirit. All of a sudden, Dane, my opponent, doesn't give me any inch or quarter, hitting me with a barrage of offense. And yet, I did not really find his spirit meter filling, or even that he was in a position to take advantage. If this game had its logic buttoned up, I should be very close to losing the match. But I wasn't. What's going on here? I decided to run a couple matches as a test. For one, against the computer, I simply put down my controller. Even on the most aggressive CPU setting, while the computer does lay into my stage fright struck wrestler, they do not seem all that interested in finishing the match. It took 2 minutes and 40 seconds for the computer to get their finisher, which they did not use. The beating continued until they finally decided to pin me at 9 minutes 17. In between, there were a few attempts to pin my character, but the game kicked out for me at 2. That's not right. Is user input not fully needed to kick out of a pin? If I don't press a button, I should be pinned. Then I decided to see what CPU versus CPU looked like. G-Rush and Falcon traded submission attempts until Falcon won with the sharpshooter at 8 minutes 31. Falcon also won the rematch with a Liger Bomb at 7 minutes, probably because that move automatically results in a pin. Grimhold won his hardcore match with Jack Blaze with a chokeslam at 7:34, just in view of the camera. Leaving the CPU to their own devices in this game isn't the prettiest. They tend to get into barrages of hold parries that would be annoying even if the animation didn't glitch, and that seems to form the bedrock of AI match logic. Falcon spamming submissions looks like the only thing approaching strategy. Otherwise, it's attack, move, get up, grapple attempt, parry, other person gets in a move. Now why would I, the player on my own, want to spec CPU versus CPU matches with what's available in the game right now? What's the point? Well, with these rather extended match times before the CPU is either in a position to win or has the inclination to go for the win, I'm thinking there might be a general code before the AI's, kill state. For the player, that would mean a long time before being in true peril. Winning and losing is much more at the player's discretion than either skill level or even RNG. Even with a limited suite, PWX being a challenging wrestling game where you have to expertly time counters and have detailed knowledge of how to use your moveset, could have a lot of appeal. So challenging is kind of out the window now, and there's not really a basis for the moveset. We just have to assume an arm drag does as much damage as a burning hammer. But what about the counters? What tools does the game give you for reversing or countering? It's most applicable mechanically, but it also greatly helps the look and feel of the gameplay. In No Mercy, you would use the shoulder buttons for defense. One was a block and the other one was essentially a parry. You'd use the block for strikes, and if you timed it at impact, you would deflect the attack, leaving the attacker vulnerable. But you can't use block for grapple moves, you have to use the parry for that, where the same idea applies. So there's a bit of nuance to basic standing versus standing gameplay. Let's say for all intents and purposes that a weak strike takes the same amount of time as a weak grapple, and there's a slight delay for blocking or parrying, so you have to either predict correctly or have steely enough reaction time to defend accordingly. Remember what I said about momentum. Even in the start of the match, failing to defend or getting countered and getting chipped away with weak strikes and grapples can rapidly lead to a finisher for them. And after that, you're fucked. It's a finisher. It's meant to finish the match. On higher difficulties, you are very much penalized for being too aggressive, regardless if you're facing Triple H or Taka Michinoku. But you'll also find in No Mercy mid-grapple reversals, back reversals, ground reversals, aerial reversals. There's kick catches which can even be countered by the Cap T with an Enziguri. For some of these, it's not quite as though they're not controlled by the user. I guess that's not exactly correct, but they can't be utilized by the player consistently. And then there's the No Mercy signature, recovery moves. The low blow is probably burned into your memory if you've played it. Recovery is in Pro Wrestling X, and I saw a reversal from the powerbomb setup, but otherwise, tactics in PWX are mostly blocking and countering on your feet with the shoulder buttons. That's why gameplay between CPU versus CPU looks pretty bad. Two men simply taking turns hitting grapples with a parry in between. It looks like a vastly expanded slap fight. For the player, there's no toolkit, no techniques, no adjustments, and no bag of tricks that could be called upon if the match isn't going your way. So of course this is probably not finalized, and that stuff is likely lesser than the tasks of locking up, hitting a move, and standing to idle. But remember what I said in the beginning. There's so much that's needed to make a wrestling game, and it still won't be satisfying. And PWX is not terribly satisfying at the current state. So like, I won the PWX heavyweight title, who cares? Career mode is just a series of matches to get to the belt and then defending that belt. Even with the match stipulations, the CAW system, and the ring designer, that, in pro wrestling game terms, is not really content. No narrative-driven career mode with kayfabe or behind-the-scenes storylines, nothing like the universe mode from WWE games, no booking sim mode, no creative promotion mode, no pay-per-view mode, no creative belt, no online play. Now let me be clear, none of those features were promised. PWX was, pretty much, a proposition focused on gameplay with a creation suite and modding possibilities. Sometimes bigger players in gaming present to you so much filigree that you just want to scrape it all off. Cut it out with the sides and the appetizers, I just want to get to the meat. Sometimes, however, a great steak doesn't necessarily mean a great meal, and I couldn't even call PWX a good steak. I'm honestly feeling kind of distressed about PWX. Despite what seems like improvements over the builds that Johnny played, I just don't like the state that this game is in. I wonder what the most idealized, finalized version of this game, I wonder what that would be. Let's say that hypothetically, the narrative that I mentioned earlier from IMDb, let's say that that's the goal. So you have a career mode that takes you through Canada, Mexico, and Japan, and you get to compete and explore different styles of wrestling than what you might see in mainstream major promotions in the States. That sounds awesome, but it also sounds like some super far in the distance idea, and it's more likely to be given up on than being added successfully. But that's a way better idea from a single player's perspective than the other option, that you have this game that plays exactly like No Mercy and the responsibility for meaningful content is offloaded onto the player base. But that's just me musing about what a possible endpoint might be. But if that's in any way true, I'm not totally sure how that operates in the wild. This would go beyond the reputation of games like Sims 4 or Fallout 4, where it's like, the game is vastly improved by fan content, by mods. In that case, it's more just sandbox appeal. Like you use this to run your eFed or you do fantasy booking, but for some reason you don't or can't run WWE 2K or Fire Pro. I'm not sure. So, we all have our favorite game development follies, and I collect them like Fabergé eggs, of incompetence and avarice. For a while, the candidate for the game in the least enviable state that still seems to be pursued honestly would be Yandere Simulator. I'm willing to bet that a lot of people watching this video are aware of Yandere Simulator, and the baroquely awful and repugnant story of its development. Just as a heads up, I have no interest whatsoever in your weird child murder game. I just like stories of disasters like this. And yet, with Yandere Simulator being all but dead, at least to me, it's still in a better place than Pro Wrestling X. And that's not because Yandere Simulator's lead designer has programming experience and could hypothetically make progress in the absence of any outside help, because he can't code. It's in a better place because Yandere dev knew exactly what he wants out of Yandere Simulator. You know it, I know it, say it with me folks. It's Persona meets Hitman. Regardless of how much they handicap future development, and that's to say nothing of how unnecessary and kind of gross they all are, he programmed in dozens of elimination methods. These elimination methods are the means for you to manipulate or murder a teenage girl who's condemned to shame or death for simply liking the same person that the protagonist likes. But you can tell that's what he wants the game to be, and he feels fulfilled when it's in the game in front of him. Additionally, there was so much of a base for this game that he was able to support it through all of the bullshit that surrounded its development. There was so much fervor that numerous projects sprouted up in the wake of each disaster or non-update. A number of content creators either got their start or grew their audience just by covering the drama. To this date, over 15,000 people are invested enough in Yandere Simulator to continuously support it on Patreon. PWX is being propped up by the support of 66 patrons with a $1 a month tier, and still has the reputation of being the scam game that's forever in development that took $250,000 of government grant money. Pro Wrestling X has such a long way to go with less means, less resources, less vision, and less audience. It's a tiny ship with 2 crew members in an impossibly mammoth sea, with not a buoy or landmass in sight. In case I haven't made it clear, I agree with the programmer that a game that plays like No Mercy isn't exactly a direction, but for lack of either desire or ability, they haven't gotten close to what Aki was able to accomplish. PWX is No Mercy if you played on the easiest difficulty and didn't bother learning the controls, or didn't bother going through career mode or making a wrestler, or really spend any time thinking about or exploring the game in any capacity. And you may have your own opinions about the developments made to wrestling game mechanics and gameplay over the years, but you should at least acknowledge what they do. Besides the ragdolling, nothing over the years have seemingly been noted or learned from, only discarded. And okay, sure, maybe you couldn't find that wunderkind dev that's able to do exactly what you want. Like maybe this is all to do with an inability to find programming talent and not for lack of vision. The thing is, across multiple iterations, I'm not sure how the gameplay of PWX has changed meaningfully since the public could play it. So I have to think it's the direction. Besides the graphics, the match types, and the ragdolling, Aki Knows Best is still the idea. And yet, Aki Knows Best gives us a game without its depth, without its tools, without its moves, without its balance, and without its fulfillment. In many ways, that last point is the real key. There's no real idea that any of the features or any of the mechanics I mentioned other wrestling games having are going to make their way to PWX. But even if they did, what would be fulfilling about the final offering? What more could it do? But the problem is, imagining what more PWX could do, and actually, I guess, tying that into my dream wrestling game, would probably take a therapy session to unpack. So let me state this in case it hasn't been made clear. A follow-up to No Mercy would have been my dream game. I know I told you guys all before that I spent my childhood playing pro wrestling games. I remember No Mercy being previewed in like the pages of Nintendo Power. I had loved WrestleMania 2000 and I was excited to see what they had in store for the next installment. Okay, so at that time I didn't receive an allowance from my parents, and I don't think they were too warm on the idea of buying a full price game. So my games came from either Blockbuster or the discount shelves of Electronics Boutique. As the release date came and went for No Mercy and I had no ability to check, I remember asking my parents to call the local Blockbuster to see if they had it in stock and ready to rent. I remember asking them like every Saturday for a month straight. And then finally the checkout dude at the other end of the line said that they did. And I remember being so excited when my mom drove me over there later that evening and just praying that they hadn't all been rented out. And I remember not knowing whether it was under N for No Mercy or W for WWF, and then finally finding a fucking copy. And like my heart was palpitating as I held it in my hands. And then my mom rented it out for me, and I remember going home, and like the first match I played was X-Pac versus Jeff Hardy, and it was fucking fantastic. I would rent No Mercy again and again. I remember I'd always get copies that made Tori look fat and ugly, until my parents finally broke down and bought it for me. And let me tell you, for all the time that I had it as a loaner, that was still like a fraction of the time that I spent when I finally had the game all to myself. So I loved No Mercy. Or rather, I loved No Mercy. Listen, would I rate it as one of the best pro wrestling games ever made? Absolutely. That's never changed. But what's changed is me. And like the more that I played around with it to get comparisons and other footage for this video, the more I was convinced that this was a genre that doesn't excite me or compels me anymore. There was a time where I could tell you that I owned every WWF or WWE game on home consoles. And yet that passion seems to have disappeared, simply due to maturation. That's what makes writing this conclusion difficult. Any future I could envision for PWX doesn't necessarily include me as a consumer. But that's something about the story that hits very close to home and what ultimately made me want to make this video. That PWX has spent so long in development that's lost me as a customer. To elucidate again on how much time has passed, we gotta talk about Wrestling Empire, made by my friend and yours, Matt Dickey. Yes, it's time to call back to that one-man band who's perhaps overly proud of that fact. M. Dickey's main output are 2D and 3D wrestling games and other experiments in different settings that play like his 2D and 3D wrestling games. Let me tell you another story. Back in the day, you had to purchase his games directly from the man himself, through his website. I think what I did, not having a bank account, was I saved up either allowance or Christmas money, and I went to CVS and I bought one of those prepaid Visa cards. I have history with this man, so let me tell you, the games that you play today are exactly the same as the games you could play 20 years ago. That's not some revelatory statement. I think that's pretty well known. And that's not necessarily even a bad thing. It's hard to dislike his output. Okay, like, if you were to sit down and try to play them seriously, I guess, you might be disappointed. After all this time, there are still things that are opaque enough to convince me that they're not in the player's control. Reversals still seem completely up to chance. Like, I don't buy that submissions need any user input to help their effectiveness or anything like that. The mechanics often lead to frustration, and it feels like you're fighting against the controls as opposed to an AI. And of course, M-Dickey graphics are M-Dickey graphics. But Matt Dickey's games have been greatly aided by two developments that couldn't have been foreseen in the early 2000s. The rise in power of mobile gaming, and the greater ease of content creation on platforms like YouTube and Twitch. I have played hours of Wrestling Revolution 3D's career mode on my iPhone years ago on subway rides. And the reason that I don't do so nowadays is because my commute changed. And dude, I even went in and paid the full price for the ad-free version of the game. And wafting through YouTube's gaming channels are Wrestling Revolution, Prison Sim Hard Times, and School Days. I feel like the most conservative estimate of revenue gained through the app and Play Store on Switch, on Steam, it's got to be a couple $100,000 maybe, and maybe even into the millions. Even if I'm totally off base, he's certifiably a success as a game developer, and that fucks me up. M. Dickey really gives credence to an adage that I heard a few times in art school, that you can be right on the money, it's just that your audience hasn't been born yet. The simplistic art style lends itself to a huge roster of M. Dickey OCs and facsimiles of real-world characters, which can be easily renamed, reworked, or updated. If you've ever made a custom face for like a sim or like a Second Life avatar, it's pretty easy as well. And in-game, there's so much bullshit thrown at you that you kind of have to love it. All in a package that can run on any smartphone, any computer. There actually might be something kind of profound about how the games present you with a lack of player autonomy in these circumstances. As a wrestler, in school, in jail, not only is there a lack of autonomy and control, but there's a lack of autonomy in how you move through the game. So if his games are hard, then hard's kind of irrelevant. Because life is hard. Taking the least apt member of your Discord server, which doesn't exist, through a pro wrestling career nets all sorts of nonsense in and out of the ring. The impossibility of being fully rested before the next show, the necessity of performing enhancing drugs to maintain your form and physique, constantly under the gun and under deadline, constantly making nothing or next to nothing, battling the intrusive thought to throw someone in front of the train. Just a commenter never got injured, but if he did, I bet he would have to work hurt. And that's actually a realistic, extremely common scenario for pro wrestlers. It doesn't matter that you're hurt. Your name's on the card, people paid to be here, there are people watching on television. You gotta get your ass out there and work. Besides the train, this is all real shit. And that's against the structure of a pro wrestling game, which oftentimes functions as just one big wish fulfillment for the player. Sorry, but your perennial world champion OC from your e-fetting days has to be Doink the Clown now. They shouldn't have made you doink, brother. So, Wrestling Empire does succeed on its own terms, even though it took time and several macro factors. I don't think there was ever competition between Dave and Matt. I think that they always took time to shout each other out as indie wrestling game developers in a small space. Seeing them in conversation with one another in 2021 on Matt Dickey's channel has got me all sorts of messed up. Here are two longtime loners, niche within a niche within a niche, outsiders among outsiders. The ironic thing though is that if Matt's virtue is his stubbornness, like the ability to keep going in face of constant criticism, that actually harmed Dave. He probably should have cut bait after Uprising. But Matt has become a cult classic, meme fodder, and even fine art inspiration, all the while that PWX was in development. He may have been a peer in 2003, but now he stands alone in a space that he created for himself. It's actually really enviable. And then There's Ultra Pro Wrestling. Ultra Pro Wrestling is an upcoming game that was brought to Kickstarter in 2023 by Sam Vallely of Hyperfocus Games. It's literally, no joke, no hyperbole, dead ass, for real, straight up, the same exact concept as Pro Wrestling X. It's an Aki-inspired wrestling game that's aiming for deep gameplay and an extensive creation suite. 1,094 backers pledged 61,801 pounds against a 17,000 pound goal. It's also being supported via Patreon, where its 953 members contribute $1,174 monthly. It's already been delayed, release date TBD. Pretty standard fair indie title stuff, honestly. The difference is that Hyperfocus has taken steps to not just mimic Aki or No Mercy's control scheme, but have recreated exact move animations. If you want my take on it, I wish the devs the best of luck, and I hope that the fans get what they want. But I kind of feel odd about it, and I think it's a candidate for a future video. The point of the matter is this: we measure game delays in all manners, big and small. Life milestones, historical events, presidencies, technological developments, console generations. PWX has seen a new model for game distribution become popular, the emergence of basically a duopoly in game engines, appear in the same space becoming a success in his own right, and a different company with the same idea coming on and reigniting fan support and enthusiasm for their upcoming title. It's been 20 years and Dave still wants to make No Mercy 2. Is there an endpoint? Does it matter? I see it going in 4 ways. PWX eventually becomes a fantastic game, either through reaching development milestones or getting a windfall or renewed support. In this scenario, PWX is a success, and journalists, commenters, influencers, content creators, they all nod and eat crow. It's been a long time, that's for fucking sure, but look at the results. They're spectacular. The second option is that PWX does reach that point, but wallows in obscurity. It doesn't matter how good it is because the audience doesn't care. And it's doomed to just be a punchline, what it kind of is today. The third option is that Dave ceases work on PWX. For as dogged as he's been throughout the years, that would mean that he dies, and that would be it. And finally, you have the toughest option, but the option that I would respect immensely. Dave wakes up one morning and says to himself or to his wife, "I'm not doing this anymore." And he quits PWX and goes on to live the rest of his life. But yet, I have the feeling that that's not going to be the case anytime soon. I think he's going to keep trying as if there's no other option. But remember this, there is always other options, and there always will be other options. Anyway, that's it. Pro wrestling games are hard, huh?
Bow to the master.